Hello, John from the Lib Dem Podcast here. We are delighted to say that this episode is sponsored by Praetor Reigns. Now more than ever, you need a professional-looking online presence and website. Praetor Reigns have been helping Liberal Democrat campaigns succeed for 18 years. Their Lib Dem Foci package combines a website, social media and email system to help Lib Dems win. You'll receive great support from real people, fair pricing and a huge range of features to choose from. Praetor Reigns are already the bespoke developers for Lighthouse, Lib Dem Draw Online and the LD Directory. They combine a talented system design with an unrivaled understanding of our party, our data and our systems. To find out more, check out the Praetor Reigns website at praetorreigns.co.uk/liberal-democrats. Now, on with the podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast with me, your host Owen Lambert, and welcome to our Young Liberals Hustings for Chair. I am joined today by two of the candidates, Jack Worrall, aiming to be elected as co-chair with Callum Robertson, and Gabriel Barton-Singer. Thank you very much for joining me today, gentlemen.
Thank you.
It's great to be here.
As this is our YL Hustings for Chair, we will be discussing why you both believe you will be the best leader for the Young Liberals and your policies for the group going forward. But before any of that, I'll give you both a minute just to introduce yourselves. So we'll start with Jack.
Hello, yes, my name's Jack Borrel. As you said, I'm running with Callum Robertson to be co-chair. During the last 3 years, I've sat on the Federal Executive, first as the Vice Chair of the Federal Young Liberals in charge of the internal communications, adminning forum and all of that. In the last 2 years, I've been the English Young Liberals Chair, where I've really got involved in the regions. I've represented the Young Liberals to the English Council Executive. And we're running on three main tenets. Number one is to professionalise our organisation, which means getting the age range change passed so then the upper age is now 30 instead of 26, including really homing down on our relationships with HQ and the Federal Party. We want to organise the Young Liberals, get YLers elected in 2021, get YLers elected into the Federal Party, and we want to inform members. So take part in more of these things, do more blogs, do open Zoom sessions, then people can question us and question what the executive is doing on a more regular basis. And that is our pitch to become chair of YL.
Fantastic. And Gabriel?
Hi, I'm Gabriel. I've not been heavily involved in YL. I've never been elected to its federal executive, and I'm not an insider of the machine. I am a former branch chair, and the branch that I got involved with when I started, it didn't have enough people to fill its committee, but by the time I'd finished as chair, I'd quadrupled its active membership. And then when we went campaigning in the 2019 local elections, we were the most canvassed constituency or council authority in the country, and 50% of that was from the student branch. My campaign, the campaign of the Rebuild team, is all about putting the branches at the forefront of what we're doing, giving them the resources to grow, sharing best practice so that we can refocus YL, reconnect with our branches and rebuild our party.
Fantastic. So just so that everyone listening at home is aware, the format will be that I will ask both the candidates a question that they will separately answer, and then they will also have the opportunity to debate and discuss each other's responses. So the first question, I know we very briefly touched on your past experiences, but what are your experiences as a leader that put you in good stead to chair the Young Liberals? And we'll start with Jack.
Yes, well, the last 3 years I've been on the Federal Executive, I have that experience. I was the Vice Chair of the Federal Executive, often take the lead on the internal matters, including collecting reports, making sure that everyone is doing their roles. I took the lead on that in my time as Vice Chair. And the last 2 years I've been the Chair of the English Young Liberals, chairing the English State Young Liberals, where I've had to chair a wide range of different young Liberals from every part of England. So one regional chair from each region, which takes a lot of work to make sure that everyone is ingrained within their regional executive, and make sure that everyone is getting the information from their branches, pushing that forward and taking that lead there. So in terms of actually the business of chairing it, I have practical experience on a national level of already doing this for 3 years. I'm confident that with Callum's experience more wider in the party in terms of his experience on the English Candidates Committee, with his experience on the East of England executive, that we both have the experience and the ability to do this role for the next year.
Fantastic. So the co-chairs of experience. And Gabriel?
Well, I was the chair of my branch and I chaired its committee, but my experience of chairing a much larger committee is when I was president of the union, and I had to deal with a committee that was pretty enormous. In fact, it's so large in scale, it almost makes YL's structures look slimmed down. And in that capacity, I have experience resolving disputes, because, you know, if there's anything more dramatic than internal party politics, it's student politics. And I managed to keep the committee together and delivering the events that we needed to deliver. So that's my practical experience of leading. I've also got a fair bit of public speaking experience, and I like to think I'm a people person. And also I help put together the rebuild team with whom I'm running. So yes, I've got some experience managing people, which I think is going to be the key asset here. It's not really, in my view, about institutions, and the Thornhill report talked about the ways in which institutional lines of accountability are often not really how things are accountable. What I hope I'm offering is a more practical experience of dealing with people and energizing them. And that's what I offer. And maybe I don't have so much technical experience of taking minutes on committees, but I have a broader experience of how to enthuse people about ideas.
So there we have it, 2 fantastic candidates with plenty of experience. I don't think that you two need to debate each other's experiences. I'm sure neither of you have lied on your resume to get here today. On to the next question. Under your leadership, what do you believe YL's primary focus should be on? And again, we'll go back to Jack.
Yes, so obviously the thing that stands out this term, number one, is the 2021 elections. They will be the largest set of national, state and local elections that we have. And as your co-chairs, what we have said is that what works best is when there's joined up working. So what we want to do is make sure that our campaigns committee, our campaigns officer, is meeting regularly with the people who are going to implement the plan that they're going to come up with. That means that the campaigns committee should be meeting regularly with each state and regional executives to make sure that they're involved with the planning. As English Young Liberals chair, one of the main things that I found out at the general election is that when we're not involved, when the regions aren't involved in the conversation, and the people who know on the ground have that experience on the ground, when they're not involved in the decision-making process coming up with our campaign plan as the federal Young Liberals, that's where things go awry. You're asking people to do things that they know aren't going to work. So that's number one. Number two is making the Young Liberals ready for the internal elections in 2022. We know that when there are more young people on our internal bodies making decisions, those decisions are better, because it gives a fresh perspective of young people in our party who have experiences which other people in our party don't have. And as chairs, we will have the plan to take forward the Young Liberals into the 2022 set of internal elections and win a lot more seats, because we know that's where the better decisions are going to be made.
Brilliant. So the Worrall Robertson coalition focusing on elections. And Gabriel?
I'm going to sound repetitive in saying that branches is completely what I think should be our focus. But I don't think I'm necessarily disagreeing with Jack, because I think to do the 2 most important things he's highlighted, which is to win elections and increase the voice of young people in the party, branches are actually the best way to do that. one, they focus campaigning in a local area, and two, as we know, all sorts of theoretical policies pass our federal conference, and then a local council group in any area does whatever the heck they like. The best way to make that local council group do liberal policies that address the issues of young people is for the councillors in that area to know that they would not be elected without the vibrant young local branch they have that does their canvassing, that knocks on the doors for them. And they know that they need to rely on young members. And so that's why branches will completely be my focus. And it is worth dwelling on the status quo at the moment. The Federal Young Liberal most popular event of the year is its conference, which is attended by about 1% of the young Liberal members of the party. And the turnout in last year's elections, which were a bumper turnout compared to a normal year, because we were riding at 20% in the polls, and it was an exciting time, was 5%, but it was 28% for Young Labour. We do have to re-engage with our members. We do have to take a long, hard look at ourselves. And the Thornhill report asked everybody to do that, and the Young Liberals shouldn't be any exception to that.
Brilliant. So moving on, how should YL then better communicate, listen to, and be relevant with the wider youth of the UK? We've discussed how it's going to work sort of internally, but how would you better communicate with people who are not only students, but young workers and young professionals throughout Britain? Jack.
Yes, sorry, could I just come back on the last question before I answer
Oh,
that
yes,
one?
certainly, of course you can.
Because if we're going to talk about branches, then I think it's important that we have chairs who have actual experience making life better for branches. So last year, I negotiated a £4,000 increase from the English party to make sure that we have the money, and that was specifically earmarked for branch development. Before COVID hit, myself and Alex Howarth came up with a plan on the Erasmus scheme to send out packages of campaigning leaflets and materials and information about how to use them, completely free of charge for any branch that wanted to. And if it weren't for COVID, my £4,000 increase that I got from the English party would have went to that to help build up those branches. Now, on the point of the communicating more widely with young people, I think that that's the real advantage of me and Callum running as a co-chair, because the day-to-day life of the chair of the Young Liberals, a lot of it will be putting out fires. And so whilst one of us two is putting out the fire, the other one can focus on this more external communication strategy that we want to come up with. Because not only do we have to speak more wide with the members of our party, we have to do a better job of getting ourselves into the media itself. And by having a co-chair, folk who Callum, I know, has a lot of experience as his role as PCC candidate, being candidate at the last general election, of getting media locally, I'm quite sure that he can take the lead and do that nationally and get us the young Liberal media which we need to push our party forward with young folk.
Fantastic. So a more PR focused approach. Gabriel, have you any further ideas or policies on how we can become more relevant to the young people of this country?
I'm going to take a leaf out of Jack's book and come back on some of those comments, if I may. You mentioned the £4,000 increase, and that's a very impressive sum. But I managed to negotiate a £600 funding increase just from my local party. And maths isn't my forte, but I'm sure 4,000 divided by all the parties in England isn't as much as that. So I do have some concrete experience increasing the funding for branches. On the question you asked about how to communicate with young people, I think one of the absolutely vital things is understanding that the young party doesn't have to be the people who are already members. One of the really exciting things about the team I'm running with is that there are some people on there who would never have joined the party at all if it hadn't been a social hub in their community. In that case, it was a university, but I see no reason why it can't be on a regional basis. Henry, our candidate to be England Young Liberals chair, has set up a regional branch in Berkshire, and I know it's his ambition for it to be sufficiently socially exciting that we're attracting people to the party who aren't already members, that they'll become active through a branch and that they will be persuaded and enthused. And I really think we can be ambitious about these things.
Brilliant. I just saw, Jack, you wanted to come back in there on that.
So the £600 fig, which Gabriel mentioned, I'm quite sure that he knows that a lot of that, or that was part funded by Callum Robertson's efforts in the east of England. That's one of the things that I really did push when I was English Young Liberals chair, and that was to make the regions more sustainable. But it's also about, you have to,
Sorry, Jack, can I just pick you up there? Because it's a slightly separate thing. What Jack did, which was also really helpful, is he created an incentive for there to be young candidates for council, from which the local party benefited funding. But it's a separate process. About a year earlier, we approached the local party. We said, we did this much canvassing. We increased your appeal by this much. We won you this ward. We'd like some money for our Freshers campaign. And in a separate decision by the local party executive, they awarded us that money.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. If we could just stick to not cutting each other off.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Don't worry. But I think we've fairly tackled those two previous questions quite in depth there. Moving on to a question that's quite dear to my heart, because I've had a lot of friends who have left politics. So many young people seem to drop out of politics. What can the young Liberals do to change that? And we'll start this time with Gabriel.
Well, I think one of the things is that we have to stop, and lots of Lib Dems like to do this, deluding ourselves that it's all about policy and that policy can keep people enthused. The Young Liberals at the moment have 146 pages of policy, including policy on Irish film certificates. I don't think that we should consider policy to be at the forefront of how we keep people engaged and interested. I found that two things keep people engaged: strong social networks, which can be built much better at a local level, which is why I think branches should be the focus. And the second thing that keeps people involved is a taste of victory. Now, there were some of us who won the campaign locally in Cambridge by 25 votes in a target award that the local party gave the youth branch responsibility for. And all the people united by that victory are more committed to the party than they would ever have been otherwise, because that taste of sweetness when you unseat a Labour or a Tory councillor, there's nothing like it. And in fact, my team is full of people who have that experience. Cosmo unseated 2 Tory councillors when he was 17 or something absurd. And Joel has extraordinary experience across the Southwest in unseating opponents of the party. So I think those are the two things to keep people engaged: strong social networks, victories in elections.
Brilliant. Jack?
Yes, well, if you want a candidate that is experienced in defeating Conservatives, I am a local councillor in my town and I defeated a Conservative. But I just do want to come back on this issue of policy and that we should do less policy. Let me tell you that the Young Liberals policy making process shouldn't be cut back at all, because Young Liberals policy, not only have we got that passed at a federal level, in the last 2 years we've had 2 motions, one of which I was very proud to summate at federal conference, and the other one, the Young Carers motion, is now the key focus of Ed Davies' leadership. So we have that basis, and it's a great training ground where specifically underrepresented groups can come to Young Liberals Conference, speak at Young Liberals Conference, write motions for Young Liberals Conference, and that gives them the confidence then to take that forward to the federal level. Now, on the issue of keeping people engaged after they leave university, I think this is a really key issue and something that I focused on for the last 2 years and have a lot of experience dealing with. This is the whole reason why we've gone through the process of trying to up our limit from 26 to 30 and really come up with a plan to keep folk engaged. And I think the way that we do that is really to build up our regions, because a lot of young professionals simply don't have the time or commitment to travel from one end of the country to another to take part in a federal action day. I think we need to reimagine our action days and actually go to a more national action day structure where young folk across the nation go to specific hubs across each region. And it's about building up the regions, continue the process of mining Callum's experience of making the regions more self-sufficient, making them, giving them a larger executives and, you know, making them really function independently and building up the branches within their regions. I think that process, once we've got strong regions, which you know, we have the experience of building that up, can we then really get more folk engaged? Once we've upped the limit and made it permanent in the constitution in the federal party, then that too will will mean that folk will stick around longer, and hopefully more institutional knowledge there will help us push forward in that as well.
Brilliant. So maintaining the policy and looking after the regions. Gabriel, have you anything to add there?
Yeah, I'd respond to a couple of things. The young carers policy is the perfect example, as highlighted in several of the Rebuild manifestos, of exactly the kind of policy we should be producing. But the question is, should we have the reams of other policy, including on glass bottles in pubs? I mean, it really is an absurd quantity that's produced. And until this year, it wasn't possible for the policy officer to reject any policy proposal that was brought to the conference. Every single one had to be debated. We do have to slim down our policy structures, and that seems commonsensical. The other thing about keeping people engaged, I would say that the age range increase, the case for me is not proven, that this isn't just going to lead to the same 100 active members remaining involved whilst there's no real effort to engage new members. I don't see why, considering there are potentially in the region of 10,000 members in our age range, we need to focus on retaining the ones who are active now. We need to be recruiting more new members from the branches, people who haven't already been involved.
Right. Jack, would you like to come back on that?
Well, yes. No, well, number one, as chair of YL, Callum and I won't spend our time going through the policy book trying to cut out policies. That's number one. I think there's a lot more important things to do. And number two, changing the age range has several benefits. Number one is that it provides more members for us, which increases our bargaining power within the federal party. That's number one. And number two, it is a past motion at several Young Liberals conferences. So it would be incumbent on any executive member, I think, to carry that forward no matter who wins. And the age range is a good thing. If you look at our European counterparts, the average upper age limit for the Young Liberals in our counterparts in Europe is 35. 26 is a very young age to cut folk off. So yes, the way that we get new members involved, the way that we build up branches is by having a larger age limit. Because if someone is there, a young professional, can be leading a branch from the age that they're 26 in one place for 6 years, they can have that 6 years of experience leading that branch, bringing in more people into the Young Liberals in their area. And that's one of the key problems which is holding us back as a youth wing, the fact that people do move on, and when they do become young professionals, they move on to the federal party rather than focus on the Young Liberals. We need to retain people for longest than they can build up the Young Liberals in their areas.
An interesting argument. Gabriel, did you want to very quickly, before we move on to the next question, add on to that?
Very quickly, I just feel like a lot of this focus on these minutiae and technicalities ignore the bald facts, which do need to be restated. 99% of young members are not engaged at the moment. And if we had those people engaged, we would not suffer with any staffing issue in any branch.
Okay, right. On to the next question, which is more a focus on our young councillors that we have up and down the country. National issues can get you into politics, but for a lot of people, community politics keep people grounded and committed. So many young people that become councillors sadly don't last more than one term. Do we feel that this is a natural part of political life, or is this something that YL can change? Jack?
Yes, well, I do think we have to do better in engaging with ALDC on this. As a young councillor, I know the good work which ALDC does do. I've been to many kickstarts. I've been a part of that process with my local team where we have been involved with ALDC. I think there is a lot of scope there for us as the chair of YL and whoever becomes the membership and branch development officer to provide more training for young councillors. I believe a more strong young councillor network is needed. There is one out there, but I don't think it's used to its full potential. I do think we do need to engage more with ALDC on this issue to make sure that young councillors are retained. Sadly, I know what you're talking about. I have experience of a lot of my regional chairs telling me about young councillors who aren't finding the issues in their local area, especially on the issues of house building. Very enthusiastic because, as you know, if you sit on any local council, it is mainly a lot of more older, generally retired folk who are there to most of the time shut down any sort of housing being built. And for a young councillor who doesn't have a house, or is looking to rent, etc., trying to get on the housing ladder, that personal impact, I think, also has a large bearing on, whether they stay or not.
Very interesting. So clearly the way forward for Jack is through training. Gabriel.
I think Jack really highlighted something absolutely vital there at the end. One of the key reasons I think you'll find that young councillors often don't last more than one term is that they're moving for economic reasons. And a lot of that's about the housing crisis. People get on the job market later, there are fewer houses, and therefore the price of them is higher. And actually, the number one way we can deliver more young councillors for more than one term would be in electing a Lib Dem majority government that makes major planning reform and we build a lot more houses. That's obviously the optimistic pie in the sky end of things. I think we have to acknowledge until house prices decrease and the economy picks up that pretty inevitably young people are only going to be councillors for the duration that they're in an area and they're going to move. The question we should be answering is how many of those young councillors we can successfully get elected. And I think with more active branches where young people make up a greater proportion of that local party's active members, you're inevitably going to produce more people who are young candidates being elected at the ward level, and you're going to produce more young people active in a party who would consider running for council. So that's why I think branches are our focus.
Jack, you'd like to come back on that point?
Yes, well, I think that there's little disagreement with the theory here. It's just about the candidates with the experience of actually delivering this. So in 2019, as English Young Liberals chair, with the regions, working with them, we had a great success with the Young and Winning programme in actually delivering a lot of councillors on a federal level in 2019, and myself and Callum leading the East of England charge there have actually the experience of delivering more young councillors into the party, and we've got to build on those successes in 2019 and take them into 2021, making sure that the campaigns committee, the regions, the states all have the ability to deliver wins in their local areas.
Right.
If I can just come back on that, it's true Callum was a very helpful force in securing funding, but I've been endorsed by one of the young councillors that I secured the election of by 25 votes, and the next year we increased the majority in that ward to over 500, which got a shout out from Stephen Bush in the New Statesman, and elected another young councillor. And whilst we appreciate the regional support, I'm not sure we accept the implication that it didn't happen with a lot of hard work at the branch level on the ground.
Jack, would you like to come back on that, or are you...
I'm happy to move on that
happy
one.
to move on. So the next question is, we've already touched on what kind of training we'd like to offer. Jack, you talked about ALDC. The youngest member of my local party, he's under the age of 18. He's a cracking lad who helps us deliver, and he wants to be a councillor at some point in the future. If you are elected, how would YL specifically nurture and encourage the future campaigners and councillors of this party? And Gabriel, we'll go for you.
So I really sympathise, because I have to say I was that young kid. I joined the party when I was 14, and I have memories of what was and wasn't accessible. I think the most important thing actually is a culture, because so many individuals were so friendly to me. I remember this was coalition years, Jo Swinson stopping me at federal conference, asking if I was lost and whether she could help, etc. And obviously she didn't have to give me the time of day. And Charlie Kennedy giving me a hug after my first conference speech. I mean, so much of it's about community and creating a culture. But I do think there are more concrete institutional things as well that can be done. So, for example, if you're looking at a local branch, a lot of events tend to be orientated around alcohol. And obviously that's not accessible for a young person. There's also safeguarding and training procedures that you need. Henry Wright, our candidate to be English chair, is a teacher. he's very hot on what safeguarding mechanisms might need to be in place, and he's going to be telling us at the federal executive the kind of training we're going to need, and we're going to need to offer branches for best practice. But I mean, I think our vision is, in my first 100 days, I'm going to be calling every branch chair. Hopefully they're all going to pick up. We're going to start a dialogue. And at the end of that, when we've carried out that review of the status quo and find out what they need, we're going to have branch packs prepared. And in that, there is going to be stuff about dealing with under 18s members. You know, sometimes you've got members, you know, not in the kind of 16 to 18 range, you've got members under 14. And it's really important that their experience in the party is one that keeps them enthusiastic and engaged.
And through a culture, fantastic. Jack?
Yes, so on the issue of under 18s and the young Liberals, I think it's important that we keep what we have already done this year. So as a part of the events committee, we put on an online conference, which this year, you know, as a policy setting process, worked very well in engagement, especially with the under 18s. And I think that future conferences will always have to have you know, an online aspect to it. And I think that's one way of really getting under 18s involved, because I know when I was under 18, I didn't really care much about the, you know, local politics side of things. I really cared about the national issues. And I think that's what a lot of the more younger folk in the Young Liberals really care about. So I think that, you know, some sort of more online events that we will see is important. And I do agree with Gabriel that it is about the culture as well, making our online culture a lot more accessible. Just I have the experience of actually doing that. So as my term as vice chair with my coach, Vice Chair Elizabeth, we changed the notorious Young Liberals chat box to being the Young Liberals Forum. And what that did was, as many folk will probably know listening, that cleaned up our online atmosphere. It really did provide a real safe space for those under 18s, for those underrepresented groups to really feel more welcomed and more involved within the online culture of the Young Liberals. And that is key experience of actually delivering a more welcoming space online, especially for young people. So that's you know, that is key experience there that we've actually delivered.
Fantastic. I will be letting my my youngest member know. Gabriel, would you like to come back on that?
I'll just come back very briefly. Claims you made there's a lack of experience. My experience is more granular. It's not of the 1% federal involvement, it's of the 99% on the ground. And we were involved when there were people from the local schools who wanted to go campaigning with us. We made sure it was possible. When there were people who wanted to attend our events, if they were non-alcohol, we made sure that they could. We have a practical experience of having young people engaged. And on the chat box point, it's definitely clear that things are a lot better than in chat box days. But I think a lot of people on the rebuild team would be slightly surprised at the claim that the online atmosphere is completely cleaned up now that it's on forum.
Right. Jack, anything to add there?
Well, I'd say it's a lot better than it was 4 years ago. And if you're involved in Chatbox 4 years ago, I think that, the record of change in it speaks for itself.
So YL Online, more progress. Fantastic. As chair, next question. How will YL work with the rest of the party to achieve electoral success? And a slight question from me here. Which SAO or group within the party are you most excited to work with? And we'll go with Jack to start.
Yes, so how we work with the rest of the party to achieve electoral success? Well, number one, our seat on the steering group of federal board is important. You need people with experience of actually working in these high levels of libdemery, and both Callum and I have that. I've spent the last 2 years on the English Council Executive during the general election. Callum was on the English Candidates Committee as well, and we dealt with a lot of the things which came there, which a lot to do with the candidates processes, which a state party gets involved. And we really do have that experience of being involved in these large decision-making processes. And so I think folk can really trust that we have the experience there to take that seat on the steering group forward and make these decisions. I also think that it's important that we really do get more involved with the regions. This is something that I really pushed as the English Young Liberals chair, making sure that every regional chair actually got involved in their regions, actually sat on their regional executives and get involved in the decision-making process. As Callum showed in the east of England, once he got involved there, he could ask for funding for candidates in his region, which really did help Cambridge. A lot of folk on the Cambridge slate that's running win elections in their local area. And just in terms of the SAO, which I'm most looking forward to, yeah, I am a paid up member of the of LGBT plus, and I know their chair Gareth has recently take their post, and I'm really looking forward to discussing with them with the whole LGBT plus folk how our common interests are there and how we push for the reforms that we need to see in the party.
Brilliant. Yes, I'm sure Gareth will be fascinated to speak to you. I mean, it was only last week we had the LGBT plus councillors event launch, which was brilliant. Gabriel, would you like to follow on?
As a self-confessed person, I'm not afraid involved in as what Jack called high levels of Lib Demery. I've not been integrated into these structures, but I actually think it will help YL be taken more seriously if we are not necessarily producing the same faces again and again to people in the party. And if I'm on that federal board steering group, I'm going to be trying to showcase to the wider party the new talent, the new people involved, all the way throughout the organisation. Jack, you called the campaign I'm running with the Cambridge slate. Well, one, we're not all from Cambridge. And two, we're called the Rebuild Team. So I just ask the common courtesy you acknowledge what we're actually called. And it's also the case that in that team, there's a real wide range of people who've been involved for a long time. And there are people who this is their first active involvement in the party. And that's a vision of the party that I want to be able to present to the wider party, that there are new people getting involved. It's not the same people or the same organisation, or as has been alluded to with Chatbox, the same toxic atmosphere. We're bringing new people into the party who are enthused. And in terms of the SAO I'm most enthusiastic about working with, I think it's the LDCRE, because I think when we grow branches, we're going to see so much more ethnic diversity than the existing status quo, which is overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly male.
Fantastic. Jack, would you like to quickly come back on that?
Well, yes, I mean, like it is a Cambridge slate. 96% of them are from Cambridge, and the two that aren't, one's from Oxford, one's from Exeter, I believe. So, I don't think it is good practice that the majority of the executive would be from one university. I think it's important, as I've shown as English Young Liberals chair, that we get a wide range of folk from a wide range of different backgrounds and not just from that one hub where you can develop groupthink. And in terms of, the federal party and new folk, the Young Liberals have really improved our image over the last 3 years through the hard work of people on the executive. I heard the claim last night that, the federal party don't take us seriously. If the federal party didn't take us seriously, I wouldn't have been able to have got £4,000 extra for the Young Liberals. Tara wouldn't have been able to maintain a place on the steering group of federal board, and we wouldn't have had 2 policies passed at federal conference. We need the folk at the top level of the YL chair that have the experience of sitting on these committees and of making progress to maintain the progress that we have made over the last 3 years and take us forward and continue making that process now.
Very good, Gabriel.
Well, first of all, it's happened before that there's been a clique, as it's called, running YL from other universities across the country. I don't like, and many of my members resent, the implicit accusation that's been made that because we were all at the same university, We all have the same lived experience. We're a very varied group. And I have to say, we're much more diverse along gender and race lines than the last committee that was elected to run the Young Liberals. I'm not at Cambridge anymore. I'm a young unemployed person, which is perfectly well representative, sadly, of lots of people at the moment. And the reality of our team is that our team is, like many teams, built around people who know each other. We reached out to a lot of people from a lot of different branches to try to persuade them to be involved in the team. And a lot of them, sadly, were just frankly scared to run for election in the YL process. And part of the reason we ran as a team is because many of the people on our team felt that they couldn't run alone in this environment. And another fact that should be pointed out is that if my team weren't running, almost every election would be uncontested this time around. And if you don't think there's a problem with a clique in that environment, or if you think that we're the problem with the clique, I think there needs to be a bit of waking up.
Okay, a respectable comment from Jack, if you will.
Yes, yeah. Well, I just want to take this point that the YL executive is a clique. I've been on it for 3 years. I can tell you that at times it's been, we've shown that we're not just a homogenous group that is a clique. It can seem that way, but I think that happens when you spend every day talking with the same folk, that you do understand folk more. And there's people that I haven't got on with, but worked with very well. And there's just to say that the Young Liberals executive is run by the same clique just doesn't actually bear true when you actually look at what's happened over the last 3 years.
Which moves actually very well into our next question, which is, how do you believe that the Young Liberals can better diversify its membership and have better representation among its minorities? And Gabriel, we will start with you.
I think the first thing we've got to do is grow our active members. As I was saying last night, there's no branch with one member that's diverse, because that's the practical nature of things. Some people have implied that increasing the numbers of active people doesn't necessarily make them more diverse. That's not been my experience. When I've seen branches grow, I've normally seen them grow from an organisation that's overwhelmingly male and overwhelmingly white, that just by growing in size, they tend to grow in diversity. However, I'm not complacent that that's going to happen automatically. I'm going to work with the BAME officer who's elected, whether that be Catherine or Jessica, both of whom have exciting ideas about how to diversify our membership. I'm going to work with the Lib Dem campaign for race equality. They've got really important ideas. And also the gender facts remain stark, that we need to involve more women members as well, and more people from the LGBT plus communities. And that does happen somewhat naturally when you increase the size of branches, but you've also got to decide you've got to focus on it from the start and create a culture and find the branches that are doing that well and say, well, what are they getting right that other branches aren't? And talk to them, have that dialogue, share that expertise. But I do think that the diversification of the party happens first if it's going to rise up to the high levels of Lib Demery that Jack's ascended to at the branches. And then it works its way up over time as people gather experience and expertise. And if we can start really radically changing the bottom of our party, then it's going to inevitably change the culture and the attitudes and the membership at the top.
Brilliant. And Jack?
Yes, so I don't believe that we have to wait until the whole party's changed before YL can start to make progress ourselves. I believe that we can have our own YL diversity review pushed forward by the BAME officer and the diversity committee. And as chair of YL, Callum and I have committed to implement it in full. We've also committed to push forward the old dice review at the federal level, make sure that's completed in full. We believe strongly in diversity and making sure that there are a wide range of young liberals active within the young liberals running for Parliament, making sure that they go through the selection approvals and selection process, make sure they're going for council seats. We want to make sure they get the specific training that they need to cut away the barriers. And one thing that is really good for that is Young Liberals Conference. Come and meet folk and actually get involved at that level actually helps folk gain the confidence from the underrepresented groups to go forward and make a difference within the party. We also have to look at a regional level, make sure that every region has diversity at the forefront of what they're doing in their region, make sure all those are accessible to all different religious groups, etc. And we have to push forward diversity at every level and actually have an accountable way of measuring it. And that is by pushing forward a wild diversity review and then pushing forward the achievable aims that come out of that review. And that's what we will do.
Brilliant. Gabriel, would you like to come back on that point?
I agree with almost everything Jack said there. I just point out a couple of things. One, we're going to have diversity as a major part of that review. We're going to take into the status quo in branches and try to share that best practice. And the second thing is on the conference. I'm not, I have to say, convinced that an in-person conference is the most accessible thing. And the best demonstration of that is that the digital conference run by Young Liberals this year had much higher attendance than the previous in-person conferences. Not only have they made a large loss, £12,000 over the last 3 years, but they're not accessible to people. And I think that's demonstrated by the fact that the vast majority of members, over 99%, haven't attended a Young Liberals conference.
I just pick
you were shaking your head very vigorously there. You can cut back in.
Yes, well, there, there's a lot to shake your head at. Number one, I don't think an in-person conference is inaccessible to those. We do have an access fund which folk can ask for money for. We've been looking at ways to make sure that goes to the diverse groups by changing it, making it a more of a grant-based system where we make sure that it goes to underrepresented groups. So that's number one. Number two, the point that it's make a 12,000 loss over the last 3 years, that simply isn't true. I've seen...
Gabriel, can we let Jack finish, please?
I've seen the figures firsthand over the last 3 years. It's never made a £4,000 loss in a single year. They're counting in the money which we spend to federal conference, and their plans for co-locating it at federal conference would actually increase costs because the cost of actually running fringes at federal conference is a real large barrier, and we won't be able to get any ticket prices back. And I think they have a fundamental misunderstanding of how the English grant works. If we can only spend it within the year that we have the English grant, £28,000. And at the end of the year, if we don't spend it, we lose it. So by spending the English grant, by putting on a federal conference, recouping the vast majority of that back, by the way, which we do, and we have done the last 3 years, that means that not only do we spend the grant from the English party, but we actually have more money that we can spend on a wider variety of things. For example, the Branch Development Fund, which currently is being used and has been granted to Cambridge to pay for their Zoom, I think. So that's one thing which we can...
Jack, if you could just quickly summarise your point, please.
Well, the point is that by putting on a federal conference, we actually get a lot more benefits back from the money which we get back from ticket sales.
Okay, Gabriel, if you could very, very quickly come in.
The figure of 12,000 loss is approved by the current treasurer of the executive in consultation with our treasurer candidate as an accurate reflection of the figures. So if you have a disagreement, you should take it up with him. Your branch development fund, the total amount eligible is currently 1/6 or 1/3 of what's spent on executive travel in a standard year. It's a very, very small amount. And Cambridge is one of very few branches that took up the money. So, and you've also mentioned that if we don't spend the money, we lose it. It's not true, we lose it. It reverts to the federal party who will spend it in whatever way they see fit. And I'd rather we didn't take an attitude of we should spend whatever we're given because otherwise it's handed back to the federal party. Well, the federal party need money and they need to use it effectively. And we shouldn't just be casual about these things. A decision was almost made to spend the best part of £2,000 on an online voting system for the last conference. And in the end, it wasn't made because it was decided that the Zoom system was sufficient. But there's a kind of casualness about spending eye-watering sums of money, which I don't think is appropriate.
I'm going to have to cut you both off here. Obviously, very passionate responses from both of our candidates here, but we are coming to the end. So I think for now, I will give you both the opportunity to have your closing statements, just a minute each. Neither of you will have the opportunity to respond. So Jack, your closing statement, please.
Yes, well, we've seen a very passionate debate today, and I just want to make the plea to the young Liberal members here. If you want a team with the experience of actually sat on the executive, sat in it, achieving things like increasing our grant by £4,000, achieving things like moving us from chat box to forum, achieving things like imposing the self-ID in the candidates process within England, and the vision for actually professionalising our organisation by building relationships in HQ, by changing the age range from 26 to 30. If you want us to actually have an organised strategy for 2021, local, state, regional elections, as well as the 2022 federal elections, and if you want to have candidates that will do more Zoom calls, then folk can drop in. If you want folk who will actually write Lib Dem voice articles, come on Lib Dem Podcast, do everything that is needed to get the young Liberals message out, then please vote for me, vote for Callum Robertson. You have 10 more days to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. And Gabriel.
If you're happy with the status quo, if you're happy with how many people are engaged with the young Liberals at the moment, if you're happy with the sums of money being spent on executive travel and on conference, if you're happy with the number of uncontested elections that are happening, or the roles for which there have been no applicants at all, then you should not vote for me. You should not vote for the rebuild team, because we want to change that. We want to engage new members. We want to energize our branches. And we want to make the young Liberals a campaigning force in the country. We're going to do that by slimming down the organisation. We're going to do that by slimming down costs, refocusing our money towards branches, and reimagining our priorities. There's been lots said about what might or might not be possible during this campaign. I can promise you one thing now: at least my team are going to try.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, for a fascinating and respectable discussion. You can find Jack Worrall and his co-chair hopeful, Callum Robertson, at Worrall Jack and at C_Robertson_LD, respectively, on Twitter, and Gabriel at G_B_B_S. Plus, Jack and Callum can be found on Facebook at JC4YL, and Gabriel and the rest of the Rebuild YL team at Rebuild YL. And of course, if you are a member of YL, please don't forget to vote in the election. You should have already received your email and your code to vote. In order to be counted, your votes must be received by 4 p.m. Thursday, the 29th of October. I'd like to give a massive thank you to everyone watching live on Facebook, everyone who's watching this on YouTube, and of course on your favorite podcast streaming service. And again, a massive thank you today to both the candidates for their time, and a very best of luck with the election.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
much.
I'm Owen Lambert, and you've been listening to the Lib Dem Podcast. Thank you.